Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Artful Soul. Big ideas, inspiration and big ideas for healing, reflection, and learning through the arts. I'm so excited today to have Meridith C Bullock with us. Hi, Meridith, how are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We were just talking before we came on. We were like, we mostly just want to have this conversation, the two of us. So we're like, maybe other people will want to watch, but we were actually just pretty pumped just to have a conversation. So today, Meridith and I are going to talk about using our art to tell our story. And people know that storytelling is like my jam. I'm really interested in it. And I was so excited when Meridith agreed to talk about it because she's somebody who's in the midst of telling some pretty big stories right now. So I'm going to introduce Meridith so you have a bit of a context as to who she is. So Meridith C Bullock is a self-taught visual artist, writer, storyteller, speaker, entrepreneur, and creative consultant. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her musician, producer, husband, and two boys. And she's currently writing her first two books, The Brave Map, Self-Help, and Violets in the Snow, a memoir. So you can see she's writing storytelling from two different perspectives. She offers workshops, talks, and community events geared to elevate, equip, and encourage other artists, creatives, and entrepreneurs to face their fears and follow their dreams. Meridith's passionate about serving her community with opportunities to keep learning without accumulating college debt and requiring a degree. I love that. Meridith's all about like, just take what you've got and go out and do it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So Meridith, we are pumped to talk about using our art to tell our story. So what comes to top of mind when we think about using your art to tell your story?
Several different things come to mind. I guess the most pertinent to this conversation would be when I found myself in a spell of grief after I had had two miscarriages, and then my mom passed away right after I had my third pregnancy and a healthy baby. Right after my first son was born, my mom passed away. So in the midst of grieving the two miscarriages, which I know it might sound, if nobody's ever miscarried before, that might sound really silly to like grieve,
No.
a baby that wasn't born. But it's a crazy thing to experience something like that, because you don't have a funeral, you don't have these things for a living being, but that's another day, another topic. But I found myself in this place where I really needed to work through it. And I actually have had a lifelong relationship with grief. My dad passed away when I was just 2 years old. So I learned through my childhood, which I didn't know at the time, but now I know because I'm writing a book about it, that what I was doing was I was working through grief when I was a kid, and I would use art to do that. I was like, I would always be by myself in my bedroom, making art, listening to music, and interacting with nature of some sort. And so those were kind of like my three things that I loved to do: was artwork, music, listen to music, and interact with nature. And so here I am, fast forward, in this grief. I don't even know what to do with myself, and the first thing that comes is to make art. And at this point, I had been making art for a little while, but I had a business kind of geared around helping other entrepreneurs and stuff like that to build their businesses. And I had this inkling to want to create artwork. And then I had all this grief, and then I was like, okay, it's time. And so I started making artwork, and I, just like I had when I was a kid, I would just internalize and process whatever I was going through my art. And then the more I shared through Instagram, the more I found a language around what I was experiencing. And then it just turned into a process of storytelling. And through several years of painting and utilizing this way of sharing my story, I actually kind of evolved into wanting to do it even more so than painting, to a point where I haven't painted in a while. And just this past weekend, I was like, I really miss it. I want to, like, get my studio all prepped up, and because I actually packed away my artwork and stuff like that because we're going to be renovating our home. And I was like, maybe I'll pull it out even if we're going to be renovating soon. So anyway, that's what storytelling has been for me. Is it's if anybody's ever gone through a process of healing, the way to really heal, I believe, is to move through and to let go of whatever it is that is holding you back from healing. And so painting, storytelling, movement, interacting with nature, all of these things allow you to move through and to let go of whatever is holding you back.
Yeah. Wow. And yeah, I would just say too, like, I have to say, just for you to even be able to, like, like we like pushed record, and for you to be able just to say, talk about your miscarriages and losing your mother and your father. Like, I know that there's people listening that are going to connect with that grief and have experienced something like that or something similar to that. And I know even for me, in the grief that I've experienced or I'm experiencing in my life, for me to be able to, like, find words just to be able to, like, jump in and share that loss, that's pretty big, right? So it's interesting just to think about, like, how the process has even allowed you to do the sense making, to, like, even just jump into a stranger online to be like, this is my grief, right? And I've been working through it. Like, it kind of almost feels like it's like evidence that, like, that you are relating to it differently. Because for a lot of people who are watching this, that myself included, I don't think I could just jump in and start talking about my grief like that, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that really says a lot about what storytelling can do for you, because when you share your story, you need to first get familiar with how you're feeling. You need to identify a language to express how you're feeling, and then you need to have the courage to share it.
Yeah.
And so if you can do those three things, then you have all of a sudden, like, taken the stigma away from the pain. Like, the more you talk about it, the less crazy it feels, and the more human you feel, and the more you realize that I'm not alone in this. There's so many other people that feel just like me. And so
or like your grief is, like, really unique to you, and you're like, everybody else is telling that, but, like, when I did my inquiry, like, I came up with, like, actually it's like this for me, right? Like, but that inquiry, the reflection piece, like, it's funny, we talk about processing grief, right? And what are we doing in art? A process, right? So it's like the movement in that stew of it is like that, like, you can't, there's no shortcut through that process, right? It's like we have to dabble and touch and move around it, and as we're in it more, it becomes more comfortable, but it's never really going away. We're still in the process of it. It's still unfolding, right?
Always unfolding. The grief, that loss, like, it doesn't ever go away, but you become more familiar with it. You find a language around it, and you start sharing that story. You find other people have experienced something similar and have different ways of processing it. And so you just understand the human condition in such a healthier way. And so it allows you to really let go, like, it'll always be there, but it allows you to not suffer anymore.
Yeah. Sense making too. Like, what, it's funny, probably about, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, I was able to do some research on storytelling, actually, which sounds a lot cooler than it actually was. It was that's really fancy, but I got a grant, and I was able to like publish some research around storytelling. So I spent probably like 2 years of my life, like, combing through, like, academic literature on storytelling, because I was like, because I had experiences around, like, storytelling personally and through the arts, and I was like, wow, I should bring this into the place where I'm working, and And anyways, I read lots of stuff. I learned lots of stuff. But at the end of the day, like our findings, our results, the things we published was really storytelling is sense making, right? It's like we're living in the soupy fog of the world. Something happens to us. And until we start to like have a story to make sense of it, we're still in the fog. We can't see through it, right? So whether it's like cultures around the world and through time telling stories around like human experiences around like why things are the way they are, or it's like your own personal story around like, you know, why your marriage fell apart or why you're this way or your relationship with your mother, right? That there's this like, when you start to like talk to your friends or write it down or make sense, there's a sense making process that happens. But then the thing that I always like to like hold on to and that I try to do in my work that fits with the mindfulness piece is then we can restory it, right? So a story is never finished. We might have like a story about like, you know, your grief at a certain time or yourself at a certain time, but at any point we can let go of that story, dissolve it, and start a new story, right? And we can add more information to it. And like, so that's the piece where your grief is kind of there's always like an unfolding piece around it, is you can restory it whenever you want, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I actually just wrote a newsletter and also in an Instagram post, it's the same exact thing, about writing a brave new ending. And that's kind of the same, scenario that you're describing. And it's, yeah, that oftentimes if we're really close to the suffering or the pain or the loss, or we just haven't developed enough opportunities or allow ourselves enough opportunity to process it, we find ourselves kind of telling a not so great story. You know, that is kind of victimizing. It's, you know, it really brings us down the spiral rather than up. And but we always have an opportunity. It could literally be the same day that you told a bad story that you could tell a better story that allows you to liberate yourself from the pain. It's really up to us to decide if we want to suffer or if we want to let go and be liberated from the pain. I mean, you know, I've experienced a lot of loss. I don't feel like I have had the worst loss in the world. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that have suffered 1,000 times harder than I have, but all I know is my own experience. And what I can say through that is that it can literally be in this moment that you decide to let go. You can picture a doorway, which is exactly what happened to me after my second miscarriage. I pictured a doorway and I was in this fog of grief. And I walked through that doorway, and as I did, I let go of that pain and suffering. And when I came through the other side of the doorway, it was like I was a new person. So, you know, I'm not exactly sure what you were saying. You were talking about the storytelling process. So, yeah, I think that it just, the more familiar, the more we keep telling the story, and the further we can, you know, just like we want to talk about anything, the more we talk out loud about it, the more we process it, the more we're able to find meaning in it and perspective in it, and we're able to liberate ourselves from that bad story and turn it into a better story. And I'm not talking about like everybody needs a happy ending. I do not mean that. But what I mean by that is like finding the purpose in whatever it is that you have experienced, you know, finding in it. So
yeah, it's funny actually, just when you say that, I remember I was at this like workshop once where somebody was doing something around storytelling, and they were like, okay, tell me your story. And they grabbed my friend up on stage and they're like, tell me a story about somebody who like is like why you're in the career you're in. And so he told this story about this, like when he was living in Detroit, that there was like this homeless man who used to come into the bakery where he worked, and he was like, everybody knew him. Like he was like this guy who had this like reputation in the neighborhood and everybody loved him. And like one day he was like killed in the alley behind the bakery. He was like shot in a drug deal gone wrong, right? And so my friend told the story, and the facilitator was like, so then you like made a decision to like make that be your life's purpose, to like never let that happen. And he was like, nope, like it just was a really crappy thing that happened. And he's like, yeah, but now it's like, why? Like he was so trying to like wrap up the bow with it. And we were like, this story isn't a fairy tale, right? He's talking
Yes.
about like something really terrible and like, and just like all of the stuff that for him, like the way he'd made sense of it. And it was why he had decided, well, it wasn't why, it was important to him as he moved into healthcare, right? It was important for him to think about like forgotten people, right? And so that was like as tidy of a bow as it got. But it was so interesting to watch this facilitator be so uncomfortable with like that ending, right? And it was like, think about like when you watch movies with your friends and they're like, oh my God, that was the way it ended. Like, yeah, but it's like, but sometimes it doesn't have to be like, so I just don't want people to think like we have to be like, and then I came through and there's all this like magic and it was like, it's like, no, it might not be like that for you, right? But it might be that like telling your story just is, it's how you're making sense of things, right? It's helping you have a process around something that you would have been immobilized with in the fog for a while, right? Like you shared with your beautiful walking through the door after your miscarriage, right? Like it's like a movie.
Yeah. And there, in all aspects of life, you know, we could think about all the different things that surround our life, all of the different stories of ours and of other people's. And yeah, I mean, maybe you could tie a bow on a couple of them, but the rest of them, you know, you never, like, they are what they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it would be really weird. It would feel like a movie if we could tie a bow on every single story that surrounded our lives. It wouldn't be real life. Like sometimes my husband and I will be like, that movie was so ridiculous that it's not real life, you know, like it's so true. So
yeah, like where's all the gritty, ugly bits of it too? Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say too, because it kind of connects to some of the conversations that we've had, is there's been this thread kind of throughout that we're talking about around like witnessing, having somebody witness your work, sharing your work with somebody, whether it's your story, like a piece, right? And that it's very tempting to like do your creative process and like secret and then just like hold on to it, right? But that there's, because it's so vulnerable to share it. But I think that the storytelling implies that there's somebody sharing the story and that there's a listener on the other side of it, right? And so I'm just curious around like your thinking around that, because that was part of one of those three things you talked about, right? It was like sharing your story with the world, right? Like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think that there are two different ways of storytelling, and one can be, you know, you journal it, and it doesn't need to be for anyone else except for yourself. And I think that you can do that through art making as well, but there is power in words. And I can't believe I just said that, because I mean, 5 years ago, I would have barfed at saying something like that, because I've had this bad story that I told myself that I was a terrible writer, and that, you know, because there were certain things that had happened in my life, that whether it was one person saying one thing, or not getting good grades in English, and not for having the easiest time reading books, what all of those things equaled, I was not a good writer. And so therefore, when I would hear people say things like there's power in words and blah, 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 you know, like that would make me barf. But I will say that on the other end of it, and through the process now, at this point, I have been writing one book and then I switched to another book for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And I've never had that much of a commitment with writing before. Now, I had a blog for years and years and years. And so that was my biggest commitment with writing. And I've also had a newsletter for years and years. And so sometimes I write those off as if those aren't writing prompts or opportunities to write, but they really are. And I think that there really is power in words, and just like there is power in the colors that you choose for your painting, and that there's power in the shapes that you use, and there's power in the materials you use or the space that you create, and there really is power in the intention of how you share your story. And it does not have to be with other people. It can be with yourself. I mean, honestly, that's the most important story, is the story you tell yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think sometimes it really helps when you share that story out loud, because then you hear yourself saying it, and you learn more about like, oh, you just changed your story because you're afraid about how this person might think, and so then you need to process that more, or you find more people that connect. And that's one of the, I think, goals in life is to connect with other people, and through stories we can do that.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about storytelling and whether we need say it out loud or if we need to share it or not share it, I think it can go both ways. I believe that both is the best way. And maybe if you are in a phase where you're not sharing out loud yet, I would encourage you to do that. Like, it could be something really small. Really, the first time that I shared about my miscarriage was through like a Facebook post. Like, somebody tagged me in like the, like, oh, 10 secrets, whatever. And here, Meridith Bullock, my friends, you share 10 secrets about you. And I was like, I had this moment where I was like, this is my moment. I'm going to share about it. Like, I felt really called to share it right there. And I did. And I had so many messages and in that moment, I felt more healed through sharing the story. So
yeah. Oh, I could totally see that with miscarriage for sure, right? It's such a secretive thing that people just go through privately, right? And to have like and how common it is, and how many, oh, for sure, I can totally see that. Yeah. Well, Meridith, I think it's so wonderful that we were able to like have this conversation about storytelling. Like, I really admire your courage to be dedicating yourself to telling your story and doing this like for so like 2 books for so long. Like, I can't even imagine the journey that you've been on. It sounds like a really, like, I was like, whoa, you've been writing for 2 years? That's incredible. I
have never been to a process this long before, or even a project this long before. It was hard because I was like, with paintings and, like I was known for finishing a painting in a day.
Right.
And then I would list it on Instagram, and like, that was my thing, really bravery paintings. Like, I did that, and then to like completely on the other end, like start a project that I have no idea when I'm going to finish it. I'm thinking, 6 months. Nope.
Yeah.
A year goes by. I'm going to finish it now. Nope. And I'm still like, wow, I don't know if I'm going to get this done until 2020. Like, because it just it matters to take the time. Also, I have 2 kids, and they're not in full-time daycare or school, so my primary role is, being a mom. And so it's really on the sidelines that I'm writing this book. So it's a long time.
Well, and it's also one of the other reasons I felt like I wanted to talk to you too, was that because you do all of the arts as well too, right? Like, you're not just a writer, you paint, you do lots of other things too. And so that's one of my goals for having these conversations, is to encourage people to like move towards a new medium, right? Like, if you've been a painter, like, maybe try writing, right? Oh, I think, have we frozen?
Yes.
Okay, are we back?
Little frozen. There we go.
I think you got it. Yeah. So, Meridith, people can head to your. Yeah, we're good now. Awesome. Sounds like we've reached our limit here. People can head to Meridith's website and sign up. And Meridith, you give updates around your writing. You share snippets of your writing too. So I think there's probably a lot of people watching this that hopefully would love to like follow you and your newsletter that you share, those sorts of things. But you're also very active on Instagram as well. I know you offer these beautiful posts that you share. I just was following some of your stuff the other day, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's like some of the most heart I've seen on Instagram in a long time. So what else? Where else thank you.
Yeah, that's good. And we before we got like cut off for a second, you said that a part of the mission behind what you're doing is to encourage people to. I'm sorry, what were your words?
A medium, balance a medium, right? Like, you're a painter, try writing. You're a writer, try sculpting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to say something about that. This is something that I have always, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but we'll just use it for lack of a better word. I've always struggled with titles, because I've always felt limited in a title. Like if I called myself, I mean, I've been many things. So if we were to back up, like I went to school for cosmetology, and I did hair for 13 years. And on the side, I started a business I opened an Etsy shop doing art. It didn't really do all that great back then. And so I found myself doing really well with calligraphy. And so then that was my focus. And I did calligraphy, and then I did graphic design. And so through all of the business cards I had to get printed, I always had to decide on a title. And I always hated deciding on a title because it always felt so limiting. And I have to say, I don't know what it's been, like almost like 8 years or something since I went off on my own and, had my own business. And, you have to have your own business to decide this. You can be wherever you are on your journey. I have to say that I think one of the most important things right now that I've learned is that we can truly be free to be whoever we want to be. Like remove the title, remove the need to identify as, this particular person or this particular person, and instead just follow your curiosity. And I'm telling you, since I started doing that, so many opportunities in so many different avenues have opened up, and there's so much more ease in following it rather than like, oh, that's not really what I'm doing. I don't know. Like, should I,
Is that who I am? Yeah, totally.
Yeah. For example, I'm drawing up a proposal today to do some interior design work for a client. And it's like, I've never done that before, but I expressed how I would love to do that to my husband. And the next day, an opportunity presented itself. And normally I would probably be like, I don't know, I've never done that before.
It doesn't say that on my website. I'm not an interior designer. Exactly. It doesn't say that on my website. Yeah. Oh, Meredith, that's so.
Yeah. So I think that my husband and I were just joking. Like the last few days, I would say like, I'm free to be. Like we sometimes say like hashtag free to be, and, because I don't know. I think that the sooner we can, give ourselves permission to explore anything that, that we're curious about, I think the happier and less stress and the more meaning we will find in our lives.
Oh, that's beautiful, Meredith. Write a story about curiosity in your life. Hey, let that be the takeaway message. Beautiful, Meredith. Well, I'm so glad we got to have this conversation. And like I said too, like just thanks for sharing all about your grief and your own personal experience, because I know there's people who will really resonate with that. And I do hope that people will go to your website and check out, because maybe you're like doing something completely different by the time we air this. Maybe you'll be like moved on.
That's very likely.
You're an architect now or something. We better go see what's going on. So
who knows?
Who knows? It's curious. We'll have to be curious to see what's happening next for you. So okay, well, thanks so much, Meredith.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll say goodbye there and connect down the line. Thanks, Meredith.
Okay, thank you.